Good evening. Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. As all members have received a copy of the call for tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the June meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. I'd like to also introduce those who are on the stage with us tonight. We have our assistant clerk, Kimberly Jordan, in the bright pink, and on my far right, Lois Kelly, assistant clerk, and returning for the first time since retiring, Dorothea Mylengard is back with us. We welcome her. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our May 9 budget meeting, the reading of those minutes will be omitted. Are there any suggested changes to those minutes? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as proposed stand adopted upon unanimous consent. Linda Bruno, District 7.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, RTM members, and guests. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. I would like everyone to know that there will be a grand opening celebration for the new Greenwich Animal Control Facility, our town animal shelter, on Thursday, June 23rd from 2 to 4 p.m. It will take place at our brand new shelter facility at 393 North Street. The event is being hosted by Shelter Our Strays, a group organized by the Bruce Museum that raised funds for the building construction. The town of Greenwich also allocated funds and the land for the new shelter. Our first selectman will be present for a ribbon cutting, and tours of the shelter will be given. Refreshments will be served, which have been donated by several local businesses. Everyone is welcome at this celebration, and we hope to see many of you there. Our goal is to thank the many people in the community for their interest in the shelter and their generosity during the fundraising process. We also want to raise awareness in town about the shelter, the hard work of the staff, and the pets who need homes. Please spread the word about this event to help make it a success. Thank you.
Thank you for all the good work you and your colleagues do. All right, is there anyone else who had asked to be recognized? All right, that brings us to the call for tonight's meeting. I had notified all district and committee chairs that based upon the reports we received, it was the consensus as follows: to place items 2 and 12 on our consent calendar, which would not receive any discussion or committee reports if they remain on the consent calendar, to combine items 3, 8, and 11 for voting purposes, and to consider separately the remaining items, which would be numbers 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 13, and 14. So at this point, I will, pursuant to our rules, designate the following items to be placed on our consent calendar. The first being item number 2, which is a resolution to appropriate $155,750 for the project entitled Cos Cob Retaining Wall. And item number 12, which is a resolution that the Historic District Commission be named the official study committee to perform an investigation regarding French Farm to determine its appropriateness for designation as a local historic property. Item number 12. So those two items are items 2 and 12. I have now placed on our consent calendar, And by rule, if there is an objection of 20 or more members, the item objected to will be removed from the consent calendar. Is there any objection to the placement of those two items on our consent calendar? Hearing none, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Consent calendar items 2 and 12, and proceed to poll your delegation. It was also the consensus to combine 3 items for voting purposes, and we would both hear committee reports and allow for any public discussion on those items, those being 3, 8, and 11. In order to do that, we must first suspend the rules. So is there a motion to suspend the rules for the purpose of combining items 3, 8, and 11 for voting purposes? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to combine items 3, 8, and 11 for voting purposes. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of suspending the rules and combining items 3, 8, and 11, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. So we will now take up the first of those, that being item number 3. May we have the resolution on that item? Yes, sir.
Resolved that the Greenwich Police Department accept a monetary gift in the amount of $6,000 for the purpose of funding the current 2011 Spring Citizens Police Academy. This amount will be appropriated to account F217-5110 for instructor compensation.
Thank you very much. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 3 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports from the committees that considered this, beginning with Dr. Delman, with the chairman of the Town Services Committee.
Good evening. Town Services met last Tuesday with Captain Barry, and we discussed item 3. This class has been going on since 2003, and the class is now much larger because they're using the new public safety building, and it doesn't have the same restriction in size as the old classroom. The donation is the same as we have seen in the past, only the funding is a different source. This time it's from the Silver Shield Association, which is the Greenwich Police Officers Union. We voted 9-0-0 with 2, 4, and 5 absent. Also, a public apology was made to the police department for my running out of time and not fully explaining their May budget at the meeting. But after review of Channel 79, it was found that I was interrupted after 7.5 minutes and not given the full 10.
Did I hear that right? So I gave him 30 seconds more than he was entitled to? Committee reports were 7 minutes? Except for Finance and Board of Ed, okay. And with the Finance Committee report, it's Chairman Gordon Ennis.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, the Finance Committee met last Monday, June 6th at 7:30 in the Town Hall. We were gathered in the lounge. All districts were represented. We considered this item, which was presented by Chief David Rydberg. The facts are exactly as stated in the explanos. This gift is composed of $3,000 from the Silver Shield Association, $3,000 from an anonymous donor, and the balance through the department operating budget. The total cost of the class, which can accommodate about 45 students, is $11,500. The committee voted 12-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. All right, we thank Captain Timothy Berry for presenting that and being with us tonight. Item number 8 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? Drew Marzullo, our selectman.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, resolve that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Board of Park and Recreation for a term expiring 3/31/14, Frank Caltamo.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 8 has been moved and seconded. Chris Von Kaiserling, Chair of our Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. We interviewed Mr. Contelmo. We voted 12-0-0 in favor. He has an extraordinary and exceptional background in aquatic ecology, particularly marine, teaches it, and has a deep knowledge of the local waters, working on the Shell Commission and others. We highly recommend him to your favor.
Thank you. And Karen Sadek-Khan, Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Good evening. We interviewed Frank last Tuesday. All districts were present except District 10, and our vote was 11-0-0. A resident of Old Greenwich since 1987, Frank is an excellent candidate to the Board of Parks and Rec. He currently serves on the Shellfish Commission and the Science Committee of the Bruce Museum. He was a founding member of Soundwaters. As a tenured associate professor at St. John's University, he teaches a variety of resource management and sustainable development courses. He's been a faculty member in the Environmental Studies program and the Department of Biological Sciences at St. John's for the past 32 years. He currently co-chairs the Sustainability Committee at St. John's. He's received a number of awards there, including the Presidential Medal. Frank is also an environmental advisor to the Holy See at the UN and follows global forest related to sustainability issues at the UN Forum on Forests. Asked why he's interested in serving on the Board of Parks and Rec, Frank explained that he feels he can bring something that is lacking, the more passive issues in parks usage. He noted that he only takes on things he can really do related to his interests of science, the environment, ethics, politics, and social and economic issues. His top 3 priorities as a new board member would be 1, to look at all areas held and managed by the Parks and Rec Department, 2, to bring more people into the environment, create more respect for all creatures, an example being integrating the new Innisarden Cottage more into the activities at Todd's Point. Thirdly, he would be interested in developing programs of education using resources the department also already has. His focus is to preserve what we have multiple uses of our park's resources. When asked about playing fields, he respects the needs for good fields and facilities to provide healthy outlets through sports and would look at and address any problems that had been identified. Lastly, he sees that we need to protect and preserve our natural assets like Great Captain's Island from damage from too much use. Our committee endorsed his nomination 11-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 8. Item 11 now comes before us. Peter Tessie, our first selectman.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Item 11 reads, resolved pursuant to State Public Act number 95-268, an act concerning neighborhood assistance, the programs and complete applications filed in the town clerk's office are hereby approved for the purpose of encouraging business contributions to nonprofit organizations and government agencies providing important services in Greenwich.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 11 has been moved and seconded. Beginning our committee reports, we'll begin with Karen Fossiliotis, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Okay.
One moment. Yes, Mr. Clark. Yes, it is a substitute.
We ready? Okay. The Health and Human Services Committee took up this resolution on June 7th, 2011, which is item 11 on tonight's call. Connecticut State Public Act number 95-268 is an act that provides tax credits for businesses who contribute to community programs that have received both municipal and state approval. The community programs must be designed to provide neighborhood assistance, job training or education, community service, crime prevention, energy conservation, or construction and rehabilitation of living units for low and moderate income families in Connecticut. A requirement of the Act is that municipalities such as Greenwich, who are interested in submitting programs for inclusion in this program for 2011, hold public hearings on the proposed programs, which were done. The legislative body, in this case the RTM, must also vote to approve the programs. Once the tax-exempt organization seeking inclusion receives both municipal and state approval, it is then up to that organization to secure funding from businesses who will then receive a tax credit from the state of Connecticut. It is a way for corporations and businesses to have an incentive to provide money to not-for-profit and tax-exempt organizations within Greenwich. This year, the American Red Cross, Family Centers, Kids in Crisis, Transportation Association of Greenwich, and the YWCA of Greenwich are seeking funding for their various programs. It should be noted that while an entity may be listed on the approved Neighborhood Assistance Program, it is not a guarantee that the entity will receive funding. It is really up to them to beat the bushes to get the various businesses to donate to their program. Unfortunately, in the past, very little has been donated. So hopefully this year, the businesses will step up to the plate and get them the money they need. The Health and Human Services approved the resolution by a vote of 11-0-0 with District 1 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Ennis with the report of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, the Finance Committee voted 12-0-0. The facts are exactly as they're reported in the explanos. It's worth noting that the contributions in 2009 were $10,000. In 2010, $500. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion on item 11. Jim Boutel, Chair of District 8.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, to identify, I'm also the Executive Director of TAG, which is one of the agencies who will be out beating the bushes to make sure that we get the funds. Make clear that this is an appropriation, a tax appropriation. I hope Neil in the back of the room and any other reporters that are here, you will note this is the smart way for local corporations to give. You get a tax credit rather than a standard write-off. The year I first took over for TAG, very first thing I did is go to Greenwich Cap and get $25,000 under this program. I would say that to the powers that be in the town, we used to do very well under this program. It's a very limited pool of state tax credits. For years, we had a number of people running this program who were out encouraging corporations not just to give to the individual projects you see listed, but to basically give in general. So, Neil, I hope will note from tonight's meeting, message to corporations, if you give and you do give generously in town, give smart. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 11. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined items 3, 8, and 11, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the result of the vote on our consent calendar items. Those were items 2, the appropriation for the COSCOB retaining wall of $155,750, and the designation of the Historic District Commission as the official study committee. Those in favor, 173, opposed 3, abstaining 0. Those consent calendar items have carried. That now brings us, while we're voting, we will continue. That brings us to the first of our separate items, item number 1, which was postponed from our March meeting to the June meeting, so it now is currently before us. May I have the committee reports on item number 1? Peter Berg, Chair of our Land Use Committee.
The RTM Land Use Committee met last Monday night. Mr. Marchese was unable to attend the meeting. He was out of town. And the committee moved to postpone this item to our next meeting, which is September 12th. So at appropriate time, I'll make that motion.
Well, you mean you are moving to postpone this to the RTM's next meeting?
That's correct.
Which is not September 12th, but
correct.
The September RTM meeting.
The September RTM meeting, the Land Use Committee would be meeting on the 12th. Right?
I am not yet accepting that motion. We will hear the other committee reports, and then I will come back to you. Mr. Von Keyserling, Chair of our Appointments Committee.
Mr. Moderator, we voted on Mr. Marchese back in March. It was a highly positive vote for him. And understanding that it's going to be postponed, or wants to be postponed to September, I'll make my reports brief.
Thank you. Mr. Berg.
So again, the Land Use Committee voted 12-0-0 to postpone this item. So with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion that
Yeah, you are right now.
that we do postpone this item until September.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. Discussion on the Land Use Committee motion to postpone item number 1 to our September meeting. This being a procedural matter, I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing item 1 to our September meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. All right, that motion is carried. Thank you. Item number 4 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that item? Stephen Anderson, Chair of the Greenwich Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Resolved that the sum of $87,289 be and the same is hereby appropriated from Capital and Non-Recurring Fund to account B 680-59830, Project 11148, for costs associated with the North Mianus School paving project.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 4 has been moved and seconded. Bob Brady, Chair of our Education Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members, guests. The Education Committee met last Monday night with Ben Branyon, School Business Administrator, and Susan Shaporis, Director of Facilities, to discuss this item. $700,000, which included a 10% contingency, was appropriated in fiscal years 9 and 10 to construct more parking at North Mianus School. The construction got underway somewhat late in 2010 due to some problems with trees. When construction was underway, they discovered that the sewer line, which ran from the school out to the town sewer system, was not in good enough shape to pass Public Works muster, and it had to be replaced at some additional cost. In addition, the storm sewer tie-in was not physically located where it was shown on the surveys, which resulted in additional work, removal of rock, and additional pipe to tie in. Those additional costs and the delays associated with it caused the project to run into the beginning of the school year. That necessitated additional costs for security and for bus transportation, and there was additional cost incurred in overtime, contractor overtime, to get the project done. In the latter part of the summer last year, the facilities manager, the contractor, came to them and said, I need more money that was in the budget, more than the $700,000. The change order to do the work was approved, and the change order sent in for processing, which would ordinarily have resulted in a request for an interim appropriation being made to the BET, probably in late August last year, certainly in September, and it would have come to us somewhere in the ordinary course last year. Somewhere along the line, that stopped. The first part of this project was the project problems where there were unanticipated technical problems. The second part of the project problems are that the paper processing failed, the result of which was that work was authorized, contracted by the town to be done by an outside contractor, for which no money had been appropriated. That is forbidden under our charter, and according to our counsel, whom I spoke with, several state statutes are involved as well. Basically, we broke the law. The oversight, in effect, was called to the attention of the Board of Ed last spring when Mr. Tessie received a call from the contractor saying he hadn't been paid. That finally initiated a real review process, which got the contractor paid. But since money hadn't been appropriated, the Board of Ed paid the contractor out of operating funds. That is not permitted. There was no appropriation from operating to capital, and that is a problem. The upshot of it is that when they got it sorted out, the Board of Ed got it sorted out, they went to the BET in May, sought an interim appropriation. That is this $87,239, which would make the capital accounts whole. And that is what is before us now. The Education Committee recommends not approving this. The vote was 1 in favor, 7 opposed with 3 abstentions. The 7 and 3 were all generally for the same reason, in that we felt that this is not good behavior. Justifying it after the fact is a poor practice. There was some question as to whether it was even appropriate for the RTM to approve what was essentially at the time an act that was illegal under our charter and statutes. In any event, our vote was 1-7-3. We have been assured by the current occupants, the current financial and facilities personnel, that they have procedures in place now that would prevent a change order being approved when there is inadequate funding. They were not in place last year. The people who initiated all of this are not currently employed by the town. Thank you.
Rick Crowell, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests. The Public Works Subcommittee met last Monday evening. Joining us for this discussion was Ms. Susan Chaporis, who is the new Director of Facilities for the Board of Education. I would note at this time that this is a Board of Ed project, and other than the item being on the capital budget list, the Public Works Subcommittee had not really fully reviewed this project, as it is a Board of Ed project, and that the Public Works Department was not involved with the project directly. However, in reviewing the project last Monday evening, we really focused on the construction costs and the necessity of those construction costs on the project itself, and we found them to be in line and in with the scope of the project. Mr. Porras had also explained to us that the delays that were caused were due to the tree problem, something similar to what we've just all read about with the MISA project in the paper, and that the timing put the project with the extra work on the drainage and shore project, with the tree program having to go back to through the town hall process, through the appeal process, put it into the school beginning of the school year, and that some quick decisions had to be made in order to make sure that the project was completed properly, and that's why the funds were appropriated in the manner that they were. Although we raised the questions as to why the funds had been appropriated in the manner they were, we voted that evening in the sense of, was the project done in accordance with the standards that we would want to see from a Public Works Committee, and were the repairs necessary? Our vote on this item was 11-0-0 with District 2 absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon Ennis with the report of our Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, the Finance Committee voted 2 in favor, 8 against, and 2 abstained. Benjamin Brannion presented the item. He was new to the job when this project was already finished. In fact, the project was finished before school started. We think that the operating impact to the 2011 budget produces a $20,000 deficit in the capital budget, as been acknowledged, and $67,000 shortfall in the operating budget. The committee learned that the Board of Ed approved this expense, spent the money without seeking prior approval. Further, the committee learned that the board did not reveal the expense to any governing authority in town until it did so in the May 2011 meeting with the BET. This action, of course, is a direct violation of the town charter and also state statutes governing these transactions. The majority of the Finance Committee recommends that this item be rejected by the RTM and suggests the board find the funds in its approved budget. The committee applauds the candid report by Mr. Branyan at Monday's meeting. It was direct and honest. It's unfortunate we didn't hear about it several months back. I'll go over the votes with you in detail. The members from District 5 and 10 voted yes, principally in sympathy with the messenger, Mr. Branyan. District 4 abstained because he felt it'd be easier to make the point we were trying to make if one or two members voted yes, then we used abstentions for the rest. And District 9 abstained because he was not familiar with the fact patterns, and also he had some sympathy for the messenger. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, before I call for discussion on item 4, I have the result of the vote on the 3 combined items. Those were items 3, 8, and 11. Those in favor, 183. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 1. The combined items have carried. Discussion on item 4. Stephen Anderson, Board of Education Chairman.
Obviously, with me here is also Superintendent Sid Freund. We made a mistake. We messed up the process. We stand in front of you.
Mr. Anderson, I believe some members are having difficulty hearing you.
That would be a first. We made a mistake. We messed up the process. We stand in front of you right now to apologize. The background, timeline, and email traffic on this issue is on the RTM website for everyone's review. Read through it, and what you'll see is a series of issues and missteps that were not handled correctly and that got us to this unfortunate spot where we are right now. No one disputes the validity of the extra charges. No one is questioning the project itself. As Mr. Ennis's report just said, it is stipulated and agreed by those involved that the additional change orders associated with this expense are valid and they were necessary to finish the project. It's the fact that we messed up on our internal controls when the project was going to be over budget, and we messed up on how we thought we were supposed to correct the issue when it came to our attention in April. None of these missteps should have occurred, but they did, and we recognize the errors of our ways on this project. There have been some very appropriately strong words about this issue. We were taken to the woodshed at the May BET Budget Committee meeting. We've been taken to the woodshed at the May BET meeting. We're back at the same woodshed here again tonight, and it is deserved. However, while this was not handled correctly, there was zero ill intent attached to any of this, nor was anything trying to be hidden or delayed in notification. I take umbrage when people attempt to link this miscue to some greater conspiracy like MISA, the budget vote, the superintendent resignation, or some other political issue. I urge you that when you hear these statements being made, you look to the person and their motives that are delivering those statements. As you see on the documents on the website...
Yeah, Mr. Anderson, we don't question motives of any speakers, so
okay.
I take the opportunity to remind any speaker on this tonight that we will stick to what the facts are, but we do not question motives.
Thank you. As you see on the documents on the website, we have instituted procedures to ensure that this does not happen again. This Thursday, I will also be proposing to the board that we expand our monthly financial reporting package to include status updates on all major capital projects. While we traditionally deal with our capital projects in a very time-crunched 8-week summer period, we need to be crystal clear that projects remain on or under budget and that any exceptions are immediately elevated to the proper level for handling. As a Board of Ed member, I've stood in front of you here for 6 years now. Collectively, we've worked through approximately $700 million worth of operating budgets. We've worked through around $60 million worth of regular capital needs. Our budgets have come in under BET guidelines, and we return unused funds to the town. We're not just spending the money because we have it. In 6 years and around $760 million, I've never had to stand here and apologize to you, but tonight I do. We understand that this $87,000 black mark hurts our reputation as good fiscal stewards of our school system, and we need to regain that reputation quickly, and I am confident that we will. We are truly sorry for this situation, and we are confident that we have corrected the issue going forward. Believe me, we don't want to be standing in front of you ever again on an issue like this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 4. Richard Crowell, District 8.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Subsequent to our subcommittee meeting and our district meeting, I had tried to do a little bit of homework on these issues, especially since two of the major cost overruns had to do with the Public Works Department, i.e. the drainage and the sewer lateral. And in my discussions with Ms. Siebert, the director of the Public Works Department, Ms. Siebert had relayed to me that she had felt that the new director, Ms. Chaporis, was doing a fine job in taking the initiative to ensure that these situations would not occur in the future. In fact, she had already gone out and done some televised screening of sewer laterals of potential future projects of Board of Ed properties, and was going to ensure that the pipes and different things were in the locations and put in the places that they were supposed to be so that these errors wouldn't occur in the future. And I think that initiative is one of the fallouts from this, and we're seeing some good proactive response to the problems that have come from it. Also, what's been brought to light, especially since the MISA review, is that the town has changed its program with the tree policy, and it will now become part of the, from what I understand, zoning approval process in the preliminary stages, so that the trees will get marked sooner and that residents will have more time to respond to the marked trees and file for the appropriate review if necessary, so that projects don't get delayed in a sense in the 12th hour once they've already been approved. So again, we've seen some improvements in the town's process due to these unfortunate circumstances, I should say. Following that, I did contact the town attorney and I asked him several questions, for which he responded to me accordingly. That I asked him, is the resolution on the call in legal order? His response was a simple yes. That I asked him also, if the member of the RTM votes in favor of the resolution, are they supporting an illegal action? The town attorney response was no, that this is not the case, that we are not supporting an illegal action. Can the funds be appropriated to the project account and in turn, in a sense, being reimbursed through vouchers to the accounts that were used to pay the contractor? The simple answer was yes, that format could be used. And that, in essence, is tonight what we are looking to do. And something that I would ask you all to support is to approve this appropriation so that the funds can go to the project account and, in a sense, be vouchered back and reimbursed into the proper accounts, even though the accounts were split between a capital account and an operating account. I further went on to talk with Mr. Stephen Walko, who was very cordial and answered my questions. And basically, I asked Mr. Walko how the BET planned on handling the matter. Number one, if the funds are appropriated, and number two, if the funds are not appropriated. Mr. Walko simply replied that if the funds are appropriated, then the project will be closed out and no further BET action will need to be taken. If we do not appropriate the funds tonight, then the BET will have to take appropriate action pursuant to the Charter, Section 30D, which would likely require, which does require, I should say, the unanimous vote or the majority vote of the BET to appropriate the funds from other accounts within the Board of Ed's, satisfy this project, from other accounts within the Board of Ed to satisfy the project's debt. So in either case, the town needs to appropriate the funds to satisfy the debt. My opinion, and what I would ask you to support tonight, is to support this appropriation, as this is the transparent way for this kind of action to take place. We want to make sure that these kind of situations come to the full RTM and we approve them, that they aren't just handled at the BET level, even though the charter would permit it. I think with our endorsement of these funds tonight, the trips to the woodshed, as Mr. Anderson has pointed out from the other committees, all being in the minutes of our records, that we have expressed our displeasure with the occurrence of what happened. However, the town did benefit from the project. It did benefit from a completed project that was done correctly, and I think we need to move on and make sure that we've improved our systems, and I think we're doing that, and that's all I'm going to take. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 4. Frank Posluszny, District 8.
Good evening. I just wanted to share my experience several days, 3-4 days ago. I was wanting to pay attention to what was being accomplished for this amount of money for this appropriation. We're supposed to get a safer condition, a traffic flow improvement. My experience going there at the end of the school period is that neither of these have been accomplished, that this project seems to be an incredibly expensive dysfunction. What I experienced was a backup of 20 minutes waiting in a line on the main thoroughfare to enter the school, while individuals were given curbside pickup accommodations by two men with walkie-talkies. While I was waiting in line, two people that were impatient both drove out of our line into oncoming traffic, one cutting off an approaching school bus to the school from the oncoming direction, and the second cutting off traffic, running through a traffic light with a crosswalking guard who said nothing to the driver, who was also led into the driver of that car in oncoming traffic, was directed into the school parking lot with the first walkie-talkie individual by the curbside and directed up to the front of the school to individually pick up somebody. The second observation I had, besides no safety personnel functioning in this situation, was that half of the parking lot was empty. None of these people were going to park in the very expensive parking areas that we've just paid for and completed. They were all half empty, and this curbside operation obstructed traffic flowing in both directions. If we're going to think that we're accomplishing something with this amount of an accommodation of money, trying to create a safer flow, we better have a system now to manage it and make it function, because it is not functioning. In my opinion, it was a total waste of money unless we manage this parking lot more appropriately at this point. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 4. Karen Foss-Leotis, District 7. If there are any additional speakers interested, I encourage you to please make your way forward.
I was not going to speak tonight, but I feel that I have to. I would ask that you not support this resolution. The facts are that certain members of the Board of Education and the superintendent became aware of an illegal allocation of funds some months before they reported it to the appropriate town officials. We should not be supporting their action, even though we have been assured this situation will never occur again. Mr. Crowell has told us that the BET has a procedure for allocating the funds should we not approve this resolution. I urge you not to support this resolution.
Thank you. Dr. Carl Carlson, District 1.
Mr. Moderator, members of the town meeting, I have served in this body almost 20 years, and I've never heard of anything like this. I think human dignity and common sense almost requires you to wash your hands of it, abstain or vote no. I don't think you can be party to this. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 4. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 4, and proceed to poll your delegation. If you are in favor of appropriating the $87,000+, you vote yes. If you are opposed, you vote no. The next item to come before us is item number 5. May we have the resolution on that item? Drew Marzullo, our selectman.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, resolve that the following named persons nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed as a regular member of the Alarms Appeal Board for a term expiring 3/31/2012. John Sluzar.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 5 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this item, beginning with Mr. Von Kaiserling, the chairman of our Appointments Committee.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We've met with Mr. Sluzar. We voted 10-0-1 in favor. The one abstention was because they weren't able to hear the whole interview. Mr. Sluzar has a long history in town, a volunteer fireman, and a very good working practical relationship on the matters involved with the Alarms Appeals Board and the operations of alarms. He's also is an ex-town employee, so he's well anchored in the system. 10-0-1.
Thank you. And the Town Services Committee report.
Good evening. Mr. Sluzar was not with us that night. We voted 11-0-0 to postpone till September of 2011. At the appropriate time, I'll make such a motion. Town Services makes motion to postpone this till September 2011.
The motion to postpone being offered on behalf of our Town Services Committee. It does not require a second. Discussion on the Town Services motion to postpone item 5 to our September meeting. All right. Again, being procedural, I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing item 5 to our September meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Item 6 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that? David Tice, our selectman.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a regular member of the Historic District Commission for a term expiring 3/31/2012. His name is Stephen L. Bishop.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 6 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports on this item? Chris von Kaiserling with our Appointments Committee report.
Yes, we failed to meet with Mr. Bishop, and for that matter, Mr. Torreby, and our communications broke down in some way, and we did not have the material we needed. Hopefully we'll remedy that and see them before the next meeting in September. Therefore, the committee did not vote on it, but I would recommend a postponement.
All right. Mr. Berg, do you want to hold off on your report, or would you like to give your report?
We'll hold off.
All right. Mr. von Kaiserling, for the purpose of offering the committee's motion.
I would say it's not a committee motion. It would be my own, sir. We did not vote on it.
Okay. All right. So you,
in order?
You are moving.
I would move the postponement of the item 6 to the September meeting or the next RTM meeting.
All right. Is there a second? Now, this is a motion to postpone. I mean, if we were to have a special meeting over the summer, that would be our next meeting. So what is the precise term of your motion?
I'd be happy to do the next meeting.
All right. So the motion is to postpone item 6 to our next meeting. Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded to postpone item 6 to the next RTM meeting. Discussion on that motion. All those in favor of postponing item 6 to our next meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. Item 7 now comes before us. David Tice, our selectman.
Good evening once again. Be it resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen to be appointed as an alternate member of the Historic District Commission for a term expiring 3/31/16, Darius Torrebe.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 7 has been moved and seconded. Mr. von Kaiserling.
Yes, these are a pair. We failed to interview Mr. Torreby.
All right, same scenario as 6.
Scenario.
So, Mr. Berg, you waive. All right, so Mr. von Kaiserling, if you would kindly make your motion.
I'm back. I would move to postpone item 7 to the next RTM meeting.
All right, it has been moved and seconded to postpone item 7 to the next RTM meeting. I'll call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. All right, item 9 now comes before us. Al Kaba, Director of Labor Relations.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, town meeting. Substitute resolution number 9. Resolved that the representative town meeting, in exercising its authority pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 7474B, hereby approves the funds necessary to implement the terms of the Town Silver Shield Association collective bargaining agreement covering the periods fiscal 10-11 and fiscal 11-12, said funds having previously been appropriated in the adopted fiscal 10-11, fiscal 11-12 budgets. In addition hereto, the representative town meeting approves the funds necessary to implement the terms of the Town Silver Shield Association's collective bargaining agreement covering the periods fiscal 12-13 and fiscal 13-14, subject to the budgetary processes prescribed in the town charter. Be it further resolved that the representative town meeting approves terms of such agreement which may be in conflict with the town charter, special act, ordinance, rule, or regulation adopted by the municipal employer or its agents of the town.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution? Substitute resolution on item 9 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this, beginning with our Labor Contracts Committee. Joan Caldwell.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, you actually have 4 contracts before you this evening, 1 from the Board of Education and 3 from the First Selectman. The 3 from the First Selectman are number 9, which is before you now, number 13, and number 14. I would like you to focus your attention on those 3 contracts, if you would, please. If you look at the resolution, you will see that it's worded slightly differently than you're accustomed to seeing it. We ask you to approve, not appropriate, a sum of money necessary to implement the contracts. To approve, that is to accept as satisfactory, not to appropriate, which is to set aside for a specified purpose. The reason there is the change in this language tonight is because the Board of Estimate and Taxation appropriated a sum of money in the budget that we passed last May for implementation of contracts that were in negotiation at that point. That's not an unusual process. They've been doing it for years. But normally, when they set the money aside, they put it in a special account. Sometimes it's contingency, sometimes it's fixed expense. It can be wherever they want it, but it's tucked away. This Board of Estimate and Taxation this year, and apparently for a couple of years back, probably back to 2002, has been putting that money in the 100 accounts of the individual departments. The result of that action is to negate any action required by this body. The state statute says that the RTM must act in order to fund the contract, in order to approve any provision which is contrary to the charter. In most cases, that provision would be with regard to the pensions. We've already appropriated the money. We did it in May. So there was no necessity for us to act on GMEA, that's item 13, or on LIUNA, which is item 14. How then does the RTM protect its right to express its statutory authority to either accept or reject? It doesn't. With the Silver Shield, we did not have that problem because there is a provision in that contract that says that is contrary to the charter. So we could get that one before you, but we couldn't get the other 2. And so for about a week or 10 days, Mr. Cava, Mr. Fox, Saran Murray, our labor attorney, and I have been going round and round with the moderator and the chairman of the Labor Contracts Committee, and we finally settled on the word approve. And that's what you're doing. You are approving the sum of money. It's already in the budget. I don't believe this will happen again. There is a possibility there's one other contract that might come to us late this fall that will require similar unusual language. But going out long term, I have talked with Mr. Mason, chairman of the BET Budget Committee, and we are all, I think, on the same page. The BET will return to the time-tested procedure of putting such monies in the future budgets, but not in the 100 accounts, thereby protecting the RTM's right to legally act on any negotiated settlement. I hope this makes it a little clearer because it's been very confusing for a lot of you and has been the cause of the substitute resolution.
David Detchen, Chair of our Finance Committee.
You heard from one of our 2 vice chairmen about the position of various of these resolutions. My understanding is that we may well have a motion coming later to postpone consideration of these various items until the fall. Nevertheless, we as a Labor Contracts Committee wanted to have the opportunity to give you our view of these contracts so you at least would know what our thinking was about them, even if in fact they get postponed. So I will make a presentation about the Silver Shield contract. I'll speak also briefly at the appropriate time about item 10, which is LIUNA for the Board of Education employees, and then our other Vice Chairman, Josh Brown, will let you know what our thinking was in regard to 13 and items 13 and 14. In any event, this item 9 brings before us a collective bargaining agreement reached between the town of Greenwich and the Silver Shield Police Union. The duration of this collective bargaining agreement is 4 years, although the first of those 4 years is the period from 1 July 2010 to 30 June 2011, so it'll end in about 2 weeks. The final year of this agreement will end on 30 June 2014. The police union has agreed to a 0% increase in the GWI for the first year of this contract, in other words, the current year. This means that nearly all the unions in the town have agreed at one point or another over the last 2 years to accept a 0% increase in the GWI, or they've had it imposed upon them by an arbitration award. The fact that this agreement on the 0% increase was achieved with the Silver Shield only a few weeks ago is an indication that this matter of saving on the GWI is still an important current economic issue for the town and not just ancient history. Indeed, it remains the town's desire to obtain at least 1 year of 0% GWI from all collective bargaining units representing town employees. The point, of course, is not only to assist the town financially, but also to assure that there is a sharing of the financial sacrifice by all employees that these difficult economic times have imposed upon the town and also on the employees. The GWI for the remaining 3 years of the 4-year contract is 2.5% per year. Our average increase over the 4 years and the specific increase in each of the last 3 years appears to be within the framework of what has been agreed to or arbitrated in other police collective bargaining agreements in other towns in Connecticut. For example, in negotiated settlements with police unions in 22 different Connecticut towns, the GWI negotiated over the last 24 months for the forthcoming 2011-2012 fiscal year ranged from 1% to 3.75% per year, and the average GWI in all 22 towns was 2.559%. Thus, our agreed 2.5 is pretty much the average. And for the current 2010-2011 fiscal year, when we received a 0% GWI, the average GWI agreed upon between towns and police was about 2.308%. In this connection, recall that the recent arbitral decision imposed upon the town in its arbitration with the Firemen's Union resulted in GWIs over the 3 years of the collective bargaining agreement with the firemen of 0%, 3%, and 2% respectively. Let me make one cautionary observation here. One should not put all too much weight on comparing GWI stats. Quite specifically, because one does not know what were the dynamics in each of those towns. For example, some towns might have focused completely on achieving a low GWI and made concessions elsewhere in the negotiations to achieve that. Other towns may have focused on reduced health care or pension costs or changes in work rules and may have bought those concessions, so to speak, with a higher GWI. In other words, please don't obsess about GWI, even though we can take comfort that the GWI we agreed on here is at least in the middle of the pact. If you look at the total cost of labor settlement set out in the materials you receive with the call, you will see that even with step increments, the total increase of the cost of labor settlement is 0.76% for the current year, which is the first year of the contract. The estimated percentage increase in the following years is 2.1, 1.59, and 2.31% respectively. The overall estimated cost of labor settlement in the last 3 years is lower than the GWI of 2.5% because there are anticipated to be significant savings in health care costs due to concessions agreed to by the Silver Shield. These savings are outlined in the materials. I should emphasize, however, that these cost savings that are listed in the materials for the last 3 years, not the current year, but the last 3 years, are estimates only and are not fixed amounts of savings. In any event, the most significant development in the negotiation of this contract is the establishment of a Tier 2 defined benefit pension plan structure. Please understand that this Tier 2 will apply to all members of the collective bargaining unit who were hired after 1 July or on or after 1 July 2011. In other words, the current members of the collective bargaining unit will remain with the same pension benefits as before. This grandfathering structure is the same that we have employed with the various unions representing the civilian employees of the town when we provided the defined contribution plans would apply only to new hires. This Tier 2 defined benefit plan structure will achieve significant savings for the town when compared to the pension costs of the current defined pension plan structure for the current police employees. Thus, under the current structure, the pension benefit is 2.5% of final compensation times year of service, while under Tier 2, the benefit will be 2%, not 2.5%, of final compensation times year of service. Moreover, a certain cliff vesting has been abolished, and under the Tier 2 structure, there will be no such clear cliff vesting, but rather the employee receives a benefit which is the equivalent of 2% per year of service for however long he or she may serve until retirement, and that employee must make the 5% employee contribution to the plan continuously until retirement. Moreover, the Tier 2 plan has new eligibility requirements. Under the current structure, an employee is entitled to his full pension benefit at age 55 if he has 10 years of service, or he is entitled to his full benefit after 20 years of service, regardless of his age. Thus, under the current structure, one could join the police force at age 25 and be able to retire at age 45 after 20 years of service. Under this new Tier 2 structure, retirement with full benefits is only available at age 50, and even then, only if the employee has 25 years of service. The result of all this is that our actuary has estimated that the actual cost to the town portion to fund current pension benefits for each employee currently is about 13.7% of compensation, while under the new Tiers 2 structure, it will be only about 8.9% of compensation. Now, some of you may be asking, why didn't we get a defined contribution plan from the Silver Shield like we have with all the unions representing our civilian employees? And indeed, the Labor Contracts Committee received letters from 2 district committees urging us to endeavor to establish defined contribution plans for the unified employees. Of course, we as Labor Contracts Committee don't have that authority, but we nevertheless did talk to the town negotiator about that. In fact, the town did initially propose a hybrid plan to the Silver Shield, which would have included a defined benefit component, but also a defined contribution component. The union rejected that proposal, and the town's negotiator recognized, as we have discussed before, that this is it's not possible to force an innovation through an arbitral decision, quite simply because the arbitrators in those labor arbitrations generally tend to seek middle ground and not to impose innovations on either a town or a union through an arbitral award. The fact is, although all our new civilian employees are now covered by a defined contribution plan, it is an innovative step to impose such a pure defined contribution plan onto uniformed employees. Why is it an innovation? Why are the uniformed employees different from our civilian employees? There are several reasons. It's important to keep in mind that our defined contribution plan is much like a typical 401k savings plan that some of us have with our employees in private industry. One feature of such plans is that monies cannot be withdrawn from the plan by an employee before age 59 and a half without incurring a tax penalty. That is generally not an issue for employees in private industry or even for our own town's civilian employees. But as I've outlined above, it is quite typical for uniformed employees such as firemen or policemen to be in a position to retire with full retirement benefits well before they reach age 59 and a half. You can see the problem. The uniformed employee is retired from the force at age 45 or 50, but cannot live from the savings in his defined contribution plan until he is 59 and a half without incurring penalties. It is for this reason that a pure defined contribution plan in the context of uniformed employees is an issue for the unions. Indeed, Greenwich and other municipalities tend to need to consider whether, in fact, they want to insist that policemen generally work until age 59 and a half or 60 or whatever.
Mr. Detchett, I'm going to respectfully request that we hold off on the defined contribution versus defined benefit, because that's not before us right now. So could
well,
we...
I'm trying... Well,
we have 4 contracts before us tonight. We haven't even gotten to our second committee report, and it's been over 15 minutes.
Let me give you the vote then. The vote, in light of what I've discussed above, the 4 regular members and 1 alternate member voted in favor of the contract, and the other alternate announced that if she were voting, she would abstain since she desired more information on the GWI, negotiated in comparison to the GWIs negotiated with other towns. We, in fact, had preliminary information on that. We received more information after the meeting, and that additional information confirmed what we had had at the meeting on 24 May. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next committee report, Finance Committee, Gordon Ennis, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Moderator, with your permission, I'd like to summarize all 4 contracts right now.
Okay.
And because the end result of our vote is going to be the same for all 4. We had a very interesting time. We began, in order to accommodate Nancy Kale, we began with item 10, which was a Leuna contract. And she reported it. Al Cava was also present, and he was present for all 4 contract discussions. The contract covers about 182 paraprofessionals working in special ed and also security at the schools. There are a number of things about this contract, but the most interesting one is that we don't vote on it. We just vote on a sense of the meeting resolution to support it. That was kind of unusual. We enjoyed that, and as Ms. Caldwell pointed out, we hope someday to have that changed. Initially, the committee voted to approve the SOMR by a vote of 12-0-0. However, as we moved through the other 3 contracts, issues came up that we hadn't considered. And so the committee acted on a motion to reconsider item 10 later on. That motion was passed 11-0-1, and afterward we voted again on item 10, and that vote was to postpone by a vote of 11-1-0. And here's why. Once we voted on the SOMR, we got into the police contract, the Silver Shield contract, and generally the committee was impressed with that contract. There were things in there that we liked. The GWI increases looked reasonable, and we thought that the handling of benefits and pension plans in that contract was moving in the direction we would want it to go. As a matter of fact, the committee voted on a specific notion regarding that contract, 11-1-0, to stipulate that the committee is impressed by the progress toward rational management of benefit programs in the Silver Shield contract. This is particularly true for health care and retirement plans. And the committee formally recorded its encouragement of these trends by a vote of 12-0-0. So at that point, we were pretty much behind what was being offered by the town in all of these items. However, When we came to discuss the next item, things didn't get so rosy. The GWI increases aren't so good. We didn't think that the benefit changes were all that impressive. We also had a visit by the moderator, Mr. Byrne, and we had a lengthy discussion on essentially 4 items. And those are, why should the RTM go on record approving a contract that will be deemed approved anyway, whether we vote on it or vote against it? And how can the RTM approve funds through June 30, 2013, which was implied in the resolution we considered last Monday? 2 of the years in that period are in the future, and we cannot approve those things. And what are the specific conflicts between the contract and any charter provisions, special act ordinance, etc.? If there is a conflict in the ordinance, somebody should tell it what it is so we know what we're voting on. And we don't think that language would be there unless there was anticipated a conflict somewhere along the line. And if so, what is it? We just want to know. No one can tell us. So why should the RTM approve these contracts when such approval could be used by other bargaining units as leverage against the town during future negotiations? And quite frankly, we're looking at the firefighters and the teachers. That was specifically on the mind of the committee. So in summary, the committee acknowledged the existence of serious questions regarding the legal order and form of the labor contract resolutions. There's also broad agreement among members that the RTM should take no action that could be construed to approve a set of wage increases when it is actually voting in support of long-needed employee contributions to benefit plans such as health care and long-required changes in the administration of retirement programs. The committee was aware of the votes of the Labor Contract Committee. As a matter of fact, one of our own, Jill Oberlander, abstained in one of those votes, or would have, had she been asked to vote. And so the committee came to a consensus on the disposition of all the items and voted specifically initially on item 10 to postpone till September by a vote of 11-1-0, and then went back and reconsidered or considered initially items 13 and 14, GMEA and LEUNA, and voted on both of those 11-1-0 to postpone till September. I want to make it clear that we understood the impact of this, and what we're saying is that we know that if these items are postponed to September, they will take effect anyway. And we could either vote them down and go to arbitration, or let them run forward without the RTM's stamp of approval. I can tell you that the Finance Committee did not like item 10 and item 13 and 14. Item 10 really doesn't matter, it's an SOMR, but items 13 and 14 were problems for us. And I can't tell you how it would have ended up had we voted on the items, but there was almost unanimous support for postponing this to September. And when it's appropriate, Mr. Moderator, I'll make those motions.
Thank you. Before proceeding with our final committee report on item 10, I want to announce the vote on item number 4. This was the appropriation, the resolution appropriating $87,000+ for the North Miami School paving project. Those in favor, 82, opposed 96, abstaining 16. That item has failed. Evan Delman with the Town Services Committee report on item number 10.
9.
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Moderator.
on item 9.
We met Tuesday night with Mr. Cava. Everything has been outlined already by the previous speakers. We were informed there would be a substitute resolution and that no action was the best action at that time for reasons I won't get into. So we voted to postpone this till September 2011. by a vote of 6-2-2. District 9 and 10 abstained. District 2 and 4 absent. District 11 voted no because he wanted to ratify the contract tonight to show his support for the police union and its efforts to aid the town with the concessions.
All right, do you want to make that motion on behalf of your committee?
We make a motion to postpone until September of 2011, item number 9.
All right, that being offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. You heard Finance had the same motion. Again, I will call for a voice vote. All those in favor of postponing item number, all right. I'm sorry, yeah, of course it is. Discussion on the town services motion to postpone item number 9. Mr. Boutel, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, I've been a member of this body for close to 25 years. I can remember sitting back in District 10 and voting on teachers' contracts with increases, annual increases in excess of 7.5%. This, having served on the Labor Contracts Committee, they look at each and every one of these contracts, and I'm amazed at the amount of work they must have done bringing four to us in one night. But they look at the complete red line version of all of the contracts, and I can tell you that that committee, at least when I was on it, and not due to me, but due to the other members, would pick up numerous inconsistencies and improve those contracts, and they do their work. And I think for us to postpone this item to November, which is basically ducking a vote, is irresponsible on the part of this body. I didn't get elected to the RTM to dodge votes. I've heard RTM members suggest as part of the budget process that, oh, we need more zeros, or no, it's good the way it is. Well, tonight's your chance to vote one way or the other. If you want to send a message on the budget and you think these labor agreements are too high, then have the guts to say so. But how is a motion to postpone? We're afraid of moderate contract increases and how that might affect negotiations with the firefighters and the teachers. I'll remind you once again, I got up and spoke against the teacher's contract. I got up and proposed sending the GOSA contract back to arbitration. I'll hold the line on contracts. But when we have a reasonably negotiated contract between the town and our unions, you should vote on it, not duck it. And, you know, it's don't anybody complain. I've said to you before, when the time we set the budget isn't in May, it's tonight. It's when you're voting on 4 multi-year contracts. If you're one of those who thinks we're spending too much money in the town, tonight's the night you're supposed to get up and talk about it, not complaining in May. So vote on this item, the 4 contracts, or in my opinion, don't run for re-election.
Mr. Von Keyserling to be followed by Mr. Detchen.
Mr. Moderator, I think I'll take a pause after that. A pass or postponement on these 4 contracts is a bad precedent. And we're always concerned about precedents in the RTM, of what our actions are going to mean and what they're going to mean in future situations. In fact, what this would do is to cede the power by absentia to the BET. The BET does not vote on contracts. They only vote on the funding of contracts. But without our voice, the only power left in the town is the BET. This body has had a considerable struggle and concern over the years in keeping that proper balance between the fiscal and the legislative bodies in this town. I caution you here. It also abdicates their RTM's responsibility to express the will of the electorate. That's what was said. That's what we're here to do. Not easy sometimes. It's not pleasant sometimes, but it's something that's necessary. That's what we need to do. And sometimes the kitchen gets hot. We still have to do it. What this would do if we postpone it, as everybody knows, in effect, it'll go into effect, the contracts will go into effect without our making any comment. The BET would have to go back in many ways following this to, as Ms. Caldwell said, to interim appropriations to fund contracts, which they did in the past. They would have a contract, we would pass the May meetings budget, then they would come back to us in June or September, I think throughout the year, for the interim appropriations to fund those particular provisions. What the BET has tried to do, and the purpose of making a more knowledgeable, transparent, and manageable budget process for all of us, is to have a complete budget as possible to give us in May. And allows us, by doing that, to fully and well compare the year-to-year budgets and growths, and to correctly gauge the cost of government from one year to another year. The interim appropriations are not considered when we go to do these things. They are extras, and they don't go from one budget to another. They're interim and aside. This allows us to do a fair comparison. I would ask you to vote, and if this comes to a vote, I would ask you to vote yes for the reasons that have been expressed by the Labor Contracts Committee. This follows a decades-long town policy, many of us in the RTM have been following, of trying to improve the wage increases in the recent years to get a zero growth year from out of each union, which we've seemed to be doing, and to achieve favorable benefit packages, which have been explained to you from the various retirement and health benefits that we talk about. What we have with these four budgets is a continuum that demonstrates in historic fact the policy and will of the town, which an arbitrator in the future will take into account and may take into account, in fact, is charged with taking into account the voice of the RTM. This allows the potential for arbitrators to keep settlement contracts in the future low. It allows very much to do exactly what the Finance Committee is concerned about when we come to these other contracts that are forthcoming, have nothing to do with these except by association, and allows the arbitrator, if it goes to arbitration, to take the town's historical policy of reducing our percent of growth. As somebody once said, they came on the RTM when the teachers are getting a 7% a year increase. We haven't seen something like that in years. We're bringing it down to much more manageable relationship. We are getting there. It's hard and takes time to turn the Queen Mary around. But we are getting there slow and patiently and consistently. We've established a pattern, we've established a history, we've established a record that every arbitrator has to take into consideration, and will keep those costs down if it does go to arbitration. I would ask you to vote this tonight and to vote in favor of it.
David Detchen, District 10.
As I mentioned previously, the Labor Contracts Committee has not taken a position on the proposed motion to postpone. However, I did want to point out that there is one distinction between this motion in regard to item 9 and the anticipated motions in regard to 13 and 14, and that is that in this particular collective bargaining agreement with the Silver Shield, we are in fact modifying the pension plan of the town, and you'll notice in the language for item 9 that there is language where we, by our action, ratify any provisions that are contrary to the town charter. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to ask Mr. Fox, what is the legal significance of our failing to act on that particular aspect of the motion, namely to ratify any parts of the collective bargaining agreement that are contrary to the charter?
Mr. Fox, would you kindly explain the operation of the state statute on this?
Good evening. Let me attempt to address that question specifically. If, in fact, this body chooses to postpone vote on this till the September meeting, the practical effect, would be that the contracts have been approved. It does not modify either aspect of the two-pronged test that one finds under 4-474. So a motion to postpone would both effectively approve the funding for it as outlined in the modified resolution and would affect, and at the same time, would validate, as we find in the police union contract, any conflict with the existing charter or ordinances.
And Mr. Fox, if you might, that is because, does the statute provide that if the RTM fails to either approve or reject within a 30-day period, that the negotiated agreement is deemed to have been approved?
Yes, sir, it does. Specifically, Section 7-474, subparagraph B, so specifically provides, and it is written in the singular, so it would apply to both aspects of what would be before a legislative body.
Thank you. Further discussion on the Town Services and Finance Committee motion to postpone? Yes, sir. Jim Bonney, District 4.
I'm sorry about my attire. I didn't know I was going to speak today, but I'm the president of the Silver Shield Association. I'm a District 4 rep and BOC member, and been the president for 8 years through the prior administration and through this administration. And one of the things that the members of the association wanted to do was, you know, I always felt, from a personal standpoint, I feel that many of my constituents feel the same way, that we're willing to put ourselves ahead of the public here, and we're there to protect you guys. And one of the things we wanted to do with this contract is show you that we were willing to help. We gave on every point that the town asked for, we gave on. We moved a little bit. We didn't give you everything, but we moved a little bit. You know, one of the things I also try to consider is, you know, we want to stay competitive with the other markets so that we get good officers here. You know, we don't want to have the worst benefits in the area, because then we won't get good cops. And you want to have good cops in Greenwich. I want to have good cops to work alongside me. When I'm in trouble, I want to have a good guy there to help me. And I feel that we gave enough to suit the town, and we gave enough to suit the members of the association. And you know, I know that they all want to please you guys, as I do, and you know, that's why we changed everything, so that we could, you know, stay in your good graces. We try to. The Silver Shield Association itself tries to be very benevolent to the town, and I would just hope that you guys. You know, I know I'm not going to argue, and I don't expect to change your tactics on bargaining with other unions, but for number 9, I would hope that whatever you do, that you just go through and approve this, because I mean, I know that the members, you know, they would like to see that you guys saw their effort and appreciate it, and I know that they considered the town's feelings and the public's perception of them when they did this, because we want to look like we care, because we do. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone? Joan Caldwell, District 10.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, it isn't very often that we have an issue before us that can divide a body of well-intended people, which is what I think this room is full of, as much as I suspect this does. And the reason is that we all want what is best for the town. But we have philosophical differences. We don't come at things the same way. I came to the town meeting because I wanted to do something for the town, my town. And I came knowing what was expected of me. I was told from the beginning, you're going to have to do this, and this, and this, and this. And listed in the bunches of this were approve or disapprove contracts. I've never walked away from one, and I'm not going to do it tonight. It's my responsibility. I was elected by the people of my district to fulfill that responsibility, and I'll be damned if I don't. What does rejecting or postponing this do for us? Well, it sends a message. Depends on who reads the message and how they interpret it. We have 14 items on the call tonight. We have already postponed 4. There are 4 contracts. It's being suggested we postpone the 4 contracts. That's 8 out of 14. So we are going to positively act one way or the other on 6. What a headline that is. We almost equal Congress. And I would hope that that doesn't happen. At any rate, if you want to send a message, and I sat at the Finance Committee meeting the other night, I heard them. I was there with the moderator, and I agree with them. I don't think the economy is getting better, and I'm a little uneasy about generous wage increases. But I don't think that rejecting or postponing these contracts sends the message that we maybe want, or some of us maybe want to send. And so I agree with Mr. Boutel. If there are those of you who feel a message should be sent, then let's send it. Let's write a resolution that says, resolved. It is the sense of this meeting that the economy is not getting better as expected. In fact, it seems to be deteriorating. That unemployment and underemployment is unacceptably high. That our taxpayer residents are finding it difficult to meet their bills. And therefore, the town should look to curbing some of its expenses and maybe a second set of concessions from its employees, or perhaps reducing unnecessary services and personnel. That's a message that if we send, there'll be no misunderstanding it. There'll be no misconstruing it. But postponement, that's not a message. That's just chicken.
Roger Laurie, District 7. All right. Will the district chairs, there being no further interested speakers, we will proceed to vote on the Town Services Committee motion to postpone item 9 to our September meeting. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Town Services Committee motion to postpone item 9 to the September meeting. If you are in favor of the postponement, you vote yes. If you want to proceed to continue discussing item 9 and voting on the merits tonight, you should vote no. So I ask that our district chairs please conduct the voting as quickly as possible, as we will need to await the result of that vote before proceeding further. So after you have voted, now would be a time to get up and stretch a little bit. While we are voting on this motion to postpone, let me remind all members, and in particular our district chairs, that 2011 is an election year for the RTM, and notices will go out regarding, this summer, will go out regarding which members can automatically have their names placed. Excuse me, could we please conduct the voting quietly? And if you need to carry on a conversation, please go outside the hall. All those who had met the attendance requirements for district meetings and RTM meetings have the right to have their name placed on the November ballot automatically. That will be accomplished. You will get a postcard notifying you of that. It must be signed and returned to the clerk's office by September 15th. Is that correct? Is that it's a mid-September date. It may be because of weekends, some other. September 15th by 4 p.m. That postcard must be signed and received in the town clerk's office. I will also remind our district chairs to find out among your members who is running, who is not running, and make an effort to recruit candidates so that we have a full slate plus in all of our districts for the November election. So that work needs to be done over the summer. There is, in order for the purpose of any interested elector who would like to join the RTM, there is a petition that you would need to have signed by 25 registered voters from your district. And this petition is available on the town website. Go to the RTM website and it is available to be downloaded. And multiple candidates can place their name on one petition, and the same signatures would then support that multiple candidacy, those multiple candidacies. All right. The petition is also due in the clerk's office at the same time, 4 p.m. by 4 p.m. on September 15th. District 7, can we have your voting card, please? The result on the motion to postpone item 9, those in favor 20, opposed 164, abstaining 9. That motion has failed. Further discussion on item 9. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Substitute resolution on item 9 and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 10 now comes before us. Peter Scher of the Board of Education.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members of the representative town meeting. I'm pleased to be here tonight to talk to you about accomplishment rather than other things. The Board of Education and the Laborers International Union of North America have negotiated a tentative 3-year agreement for the period covering July 1, 2010 through June 30th, 2013. Although this agreement does not require by statute ratification by the RTM, in an effort to continue consultation between the Board of Education and the RTM, we have proposed a sense of the meeting resolution so that the RTM can express its approval or disapproval prior to the Board of Education acting on the agreement. The item is as it appears in the call.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 10 has been moved and seconded. Bob Brady with the report of our Education Committee.
Good evening. Nancy, we met on this last Monday night. All districts other than District 2 were represented. Nancy Kale, Board of Ed member and negotiating committee member, assisted us with the item. As Mr. Scheer mentioned, 3-year agreement from July last year to June 30th, 13. 182 people, principally teachers' aides, and some security guards. The contract, the overall average annual cost for the 3 years is 1.3% per year. The general wage increase is 2.6% over that period. The latter amount is offset by the health care savings to get down to the 1.3%. It's the 2.6% which shows up in the Board of Ed budget because the health care costs are on the town side budget. This agreement is presented to the RTM for information. The Board of Ed has the sole authority to enter into the agreement for the town. The resolution is in 2 parts. The first part waives any charter or other town governing provisions which conflict with the agreement's terms. The second part is a sense of the meeting resolution, asking us to express our support for the Board of Ed agreement. Our vote was 10-0-1. District 7 abstained, believing the rate of increase in the agreement is too high. Thank you.
Don Hamilton, Vice Chair of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, I'm actually the Secretary of the Legislative and Rules, but both the Chairman, Douglas Wells, and the Vice Chairman, Kip Berweger, were happily away on vacation last week. So I stood in as moderator, and I was ably assisted by Kathleen Francis, who took my place as Secretary, also from District 7, as I am. This sense of the meeting resolution was presented as Mr. Brady mentioned, as a courtesy of, as the BOE have sole authority for negotiating the contract for the period beginning 2010-2011 fiscal year to June 30th, 2013. There was no one from the BOE or the Law Department present at Legislative and Rules meeting, which I think is unfortunate because not only this contract but the other labor contracts arguably should have gone before LNR at this time. The contract covers 182 professional assistants and 10 security personnel. The current base year cost all in was $8.185 million, with annual escalators applying to the $4.5 million in salaries only of 1.9, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.3% plus increments based on years of service. Total escalators, cost escalators were substantially less because of give-ups and moderation in other areas, 1.38%, 0.8%, and 1.65% for the 3 years. Special ed and ESL teaching assistants account for 154 and a half full and part-time positions of the 182 total. Dr. Bolger, formerly principal of Central Middle School and member of District 6 on the committee, remarked that these were very dedicated, often underpaid assistant teaching assistants who presented the educational system in town a valuable pool of future fully designated teachers. Moderator Byrne added that the resolution as written might be an error in asking the RTM to approve funding for the full 3 years instead of the prescribed funding authority for 1 year at a time for the next fiscal year only. He indicated an amended resolution was likely to be offered, which it was. The committee voted 9-0-0 as to legal order. Districts 1, 2, and 10 were absent. Thank you.
Thank you. David Detchen with the Labor Contracts Report.
This item on the call is different from the other labor contract issues we are considering tonight because it was always intended that any action that the RTM takes in regard to this matter would be advisory in nature only and have no legal effect whatsoever. Indeed, this would always be the case simply because the RTM has no authority to approve this contract. This is so because of a quirk in the state law regulating the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements with municipal employees. Due to this quirk, the negotiation of a labor contract with a collective bargaining unit whose employees are within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education is treated differently from the negotiation of other collective bargaining agreements. Specifically, the negotiation of such a contract involving such employees within the jurisdiction of the BOE is within the sole authority of the Board of Education, which also has the sole authority to ratify the negotiated contract. In fact, this matter is before us at the request of the Board of Education so that the RTM may express its advisory opinion on whether it considers the terms of the contract negotiated by the Board of Education to be appropriate. As you have heard, please understand that even if the RTM were to vote to disapproval of this contract, the vote would have no binding legal effect, and at least theoretically the BOE could nevertheless go ahead and ratify the contract it has negotiated with LIUNA. You have heard explained the terms of the negotiated contract. The BOE will consider and vote whether to ratify the contract at a meeting of the Board of Education after this meeting. I should point out that although the negotiation and ratification of this contract is entirely within the jurisdiction of the Board of Education, members of the negotiating team of the Board did meet with your Labor Contracts Committee to discuss the negotiating goals of the Board of Education, and the Board of Education's negotiating team worked closely with the town's labor negotiator, Al Cava, on the health care aspects of the contract. Your Labor Contracts Committee discussed the negotiated contract with a representative of the Board of Education at our meeting on 24 May 2011. Subsequently, the Labor Contracts Committee voted as follows. 3 regular members and both alternates of the Labor Contracts Committee voted or would have voted to recommend to the RTM that the RTM vote in advisory fashion that the RTM finds the terms of the contract acceptable. The other regular member of the Labor Contracts Committee in attendance at the meeting, your chairman, in other words, your Trusley, abstained from voting because he did not wish to vote either for or against an advisory resolution which he considered unnecessary and of no legal effect, and whose very presence on the call he believed obscured the fact that the state statute as currently written deprives the RTM of the authority to vote in a binding and effective manner on this contract. The irony of it is that I, as the chairman, endeavored before the agenda closed for this meeting to try to persuade everybody not to put this on the call, and essentially I was overruled. In any event, your Labor Contracts Committee is currently planning to submit to the RTM in September a sense of the meeting resolution that would request the town's representatives in the state legislature to work toward the amendment of the relevant state statute in order to provide the RTM with such legal authority.
All right, and Mr. Ennis, you have previously given us the Finance Committee report, and you have nothing further to add at this point?
I will add one comment, Mr. Moderator, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, I gave my report earlier, so you all have the stats. If you don't have it, you can get it on the net. You're welcome to it. I want to make one thing clear. There's been some comment tonight about the Finance Committee, I think, ducking a vote. Committee didn't duck the vote. The committee was very courageous in what it did, and the vote on the postponement is evidence of that. What the committee said is, if we postpone this until September, these contracts will be approved. We agree with that. What we don't want to do is go on record as approving two of those contracts that we basically disagree with, and not approving the other two. So I take personal offense, I think, if people think we tried to duck this issue. We didn't duck it, the committee didn't duck it. We hit it head on, and we formed a strategy we thought would make some sense. If you don't agree, that's what this is about, and you're welcome to disagree. But don't think for a minute that we're not on the job. That's just not fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 10? Right, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 10, and proceed to poll your delegation. While I do have the result of the vote on substitute resolution item number 9, the Silver Shield contract. Those in favor, 156. Opposed, 24. Abstaining, 6. That item has carried. Item 13 now. Yes. Betsy Fruman, District 9. Well, there was no motion offered on 10. Okay, right. The motion to postpone that we voted on was limited solely to item 9. All right. So we are now, I've called for the vote on item 10. And we are now proceeding to item 11. Al Cava with, I'm sorry, item 13. Al Cava with that resolution.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, town meeting. Resolved, a substitute resolution number 13. Resolved that the representative town meeting, in exercising its authority pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 7474B, hereby approves the funds necessary to implement the terms of the Town Greenwich Municipal Employees Association collective bargaining agreement covering the periods fiscal 10-11 and fiscal 11-12. Said funds having previously been appropriated in the adopted fiscal 10-11 and fiscal 11-12 budgets. In addition thereto, the representative town meeting approves the funds necessary to implement the terms of the Town Greenwich Municipal Employees Association collective bargaining agreement covering the period fiscal 12-13, subject to the budgetary process as prescribed in the town charter. Be it further resolved that the representative town meeting approves any terms of such agreement which may be in conflict with the town charter, special act, ordinance, rule, or regulation adopted by the municipal employer or its agents of the town.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution on item 13? Substitute resolution on item 13 has been moved and seconded. Joshua Brown with the report of our Labor Contracts Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests, Labor Contracts voted 3 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstaining. The opposed was feeling that this class of employees have a high base pay already, fairly low turnover, and essentially fairly rich in their perspective of an award. or an agreement. This covers approximately 304 full-time and 126 part-time employees. These are administrative people, healthcare aides. There were some provisions that dealt with copay increases, helping share some of the additional costs that the town continues to be burdened with. Some of these agreements also included electronic payment features such that there will be no more printing of checks for payroll with these unions, that the funds will be transferred electronically. As I indicated, this agreement or this bargaining unit has a very low turnover, about 5% turnover in this group. A very, very stable workforce. There were also some credits that dealt with employees' contribution to the OPEB funds, and the town's also contributing to that fund. Another key attribute of this was an agreement that there would be a piloting, some cross-training opportunities to help be able to deploy people into other jobs. So we thought that was a valid and important element. With this collective bargaining unit, they had already agreed to a 0% in the prior period. So each of the 3 years do have a GWI increase, as well as step increment increases as well. So our vote again, 3 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstaining.
Thank you. Evan Delman with the Town Services Committee report.
Good evening. Again, we had Mr. Kava with us. I thank Mr. Brown for giving everything that now I don't have to. We were also, again, told there would be a substitute resolution put in place, and the best thing to do would be to take no action. So again, we made a motion to postpone until September. 6-2-2, 9 and 10 abstained, 2 and 4 absent. And at the appropriate time, I'll make.
Mr. Ennis, anything further? Thank you. Mr. Delman?
Town Services makes a motion to postpone until September.
Discussion on the Town Services motion to postpone item 13 to our September meeting. That being offered on behalf of a committee does not require a second. Any discussion on that? Irv Porter, District 6.
I'm here to support the chairman of the Finance Committee tonight as vice chairman. And my reasoning is very simple. I would prefer not to be called irresponsible. I would prefer to be called intelligent. There are 5 criteria that make a difference when it comes to someone that fulfills the commitments that we have to fulfill. Honesty, integrity, the willingness to confront on the basis of principle, that is, draw a line in the sand, empathy, and perseverance. I think we've been honest. We have said what we thought. We clearly have confronted the issue intelligently, and that's the reason for postponement. We've been empathetic, based upon the sense of the meeting resolution that we gave in support of the Silver Shield contract. And I'm here to tell you that I will persevere and ask you to rethink this again, and I therefore ask you to support the motion to postpone until September.
Further discussion on the Town Services motion to postpone. Mr. Boutel, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, I spoke to the chairman of the Finance Committee. I certainly intended no personal affront to anyone, but I would point out, speaking to him, that it is this contract and the next contract that they have a problem with. And if these are 2 contracts where you do in fact think we're paying too much, vote no. If not, vote yes. But one way or the other, we vote. Motion to postpone, how are we supposed to interpret that? Does it mean we think we're paying too much? Does it mean we think we're paying too little? My problem with a motion to postpone is I don't know what the heck it means.
Point of information,
Mr. Porter?
would you please clarify for the body, Mr. Chairman, what your interpretation is of the motion to postpone with regard to whether or not the contracts as currently structured will move forward, irrespective of what this body does?
We've heard that. It is the same answer as before. Now, I do feel compelled to respond because I simply don't understand the comments that have been made here. This is a context, we are acting in a context with collective bargaining agreements, unlike every other matter we are asked to vote on. The state, by state law, has taken control of collective bargaining away from municipalities in the sense that, under certain conditions, we can have imposed on us a result, and we have no control, ultimately, to say we reject that result. And so the situation, so that everybody understands how this operates, if we vote to reject a settlement, by state law, the issues go to binding arbitration, and an award is issued by a panel of 3 arbitrators, one selected by the unit, one selected by the municipality, and one selected by the 2 arbitrators who had been chosen. That award then can be rejected by the legislative body, which in this case is the RTM in Greenwich, and it then, if it were to be rejected, it goes back to another panel. The town, the RTM can express the reasons for rejecting, and this second panel then issues a final decision, taking the last best offer from both sides. And so the situation that we find ourselves in is we may not like a negotiated agreement or an arbitration award, but we may recognize that by rejecting, we could end up with something worse. So it just seems apparent to me that you may want to say, I don't approve of what has been brought to me, but I am not going, this is not the case where I'm in control and can say I reject it. Because ultimately, it may end up with worse terms. So it seems to me logical to say, all right, I don't want that situation, but I can't bring myself to vote in favor of something that I'm not in favor of. So I would agree with the comments. I don't see anything irresponsible about the proposed motions to postpone. I am not advocating. I don't really care either way because the effect is the same. If you vote against the motion to postpone and then approve it, it would be the same as voting, the effect would be the same as adopting the motion to postpone. Mr. Brown. I thought I was explaining, answering the question asked by Mr. Porter. Thank you. Further discussion on the pending motion to postpone. Okay, I think that makes sense. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Town Services motion to postpone item 13 to the September meeting. If you are in favor of putting this off, and thereby it would not come back to us in September, the agreement would automatically take effect if the motion to postpone is adopted, you should vote yes. If you want to vote on the merits of item 13 tonight, you should vote no. And once again, I ask our district chairs to expedite the voting because we must await the result before proceeding further. We have the result of the vote on item number 10, which is the sense of the meeting resolution regarding the Liuna Board of Education contract. Those in favor, 130. Opposed, 35. Abstaining, 23. That item has carried. We have the result of the vote on the Town Services motion to postpone item 13 to September. Those in favor, 53, opposed 124, abstaining 4. That motion has failed. Further discussion on item 13. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item 13, substitute resolution on item 13, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 14 now comes before us. Al Cava with that resolution.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, town meeting. Substitute resolution number 14. Resolved that the representative town meeting, in exercising its authority pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 7474B, hereby approves the funds necessary to implement the terms of the town LiUNA Local 136 collective bargaining agreement covering the periods fiscal 10-11 and fiscal 11-12. Said funds having previously been appropriated in the adopted fiscal 10-11 and fiscal 11-12 budgets. In addition thereto, the representative town meeting approves the funds necessary to implement the terms of the town LiUNA Local 136 collective bargaining agreement covering the period fiscal 12-13, subject to the budgetary process as prescribed in the town charter. Be it further resolved, the representative town meeting approves any terms of such agreement which may be in conflict with the town charter, special act, ordinance, rule, or regulation adopted by the municipal employer or its agents of the town.
Will the member please move the adoption of the substitute resolution on item 14? The substitute resolution on item 14 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Brown with the Labor Contracts Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow members and guests. The Labor Contracts Committee voted 4 in favor, 1 opposed to this agreement. It covers approximately 196 full-time employees, which includes about 60 nurses, all mainly working at Nathaniel Witherell. The balance are supervisory personnel, a lot in DPW, a lot of engineers, some middle management professional individuals. This again was an item that this collective bargaining unit had previously accepted a 0 increase in the prior year. We felt that this was a very good agreement. Many of these people are at the top of their pay grades. They're not in steps coming up, so very few of these are receiving increments. Again, we felt that the increases were reasonable. One of the members felt again that there was very low turnover and something should be done about that. Again, the vote in favor, 4 in favor, 1 opposed.
Mr. Delman with our Town Services Committee report.
Good evening. Again, for the same reasons, we voted 7-1-3 to postpone this. District 8, 9, 10 abstained, 2 absent. District 8 is a town employee, which is why she abstained. And I was wondering, can we call this the finance motion to postpone rather than town services this time?
You can, in your good judgment, not offer it.
If that would be in legal order, I will go sit down now.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Ennis, nothing further. All right. Further discussion on item 14. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Substitute resolution on item 14 and proceed to poll your delegation. That being the last matter on our agenda, we will need to await the result of that vote before proceeding to adjourn. This is on the merits of item 14. If you are in favor of approving this, you vote yes. If you are not in favor of approving it, you vote no. We have the result of the vote on item 13, which is the GMEA negotiated contract. Those in favor, 120. Opposed, 44. Abstaining, 13. That item is carried. We have the result of the vote on item 14, the LIUNA contract. Those in favor, 117. Opposed, 45. Abstaining, 20. That item has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting and absent objection, this meeting stands adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming and have a safe trip home.